All right, let's talk about something that runs our entire world but is completely invisible. As a cleanroom engineer, I live in that world. But what happens when the systems designed to keep things perfectly, microscopically clean fail? Today, we're going to zoom in on a tiny problem that has massive consequences.
$100,000. Just let that sink in. That can be the price tag for a single hole in a filter. A hole so small you could never, ever see it with your own eyes. One tiny breach can destroy an entire batch of medicine or shut down a semiconductor plant. The stakes are just unbelievably high. That's exactly why we call this the silent killer in our industry. It's this invisible threat that can cause absolute catastrophe. And you gotta understand, in the US, following the FDA and ISO standards isn't just a good idea, it's the law. So today, we're going on the hunt. Now, to really get how we fight this threat, we have to go back in time. And you'll probably be surprised to hear that the very technology protecting the chip in your phone was actually born during the race to build the first atomic bomb. Yeah, the history here is pretty wild. Back in World War II, the Manhattan Project had a huge problem: radioactive dust. Their solution? The HEPA filter. So for the next 50 years or so, we tested these filters with something called DOP, which is basically a fine mist of liquid plastic. But then, around the 2000s, agencies like the EPA and OSHA went, hold on, and flagged it as a potential health risk. That forced a huge, and necessary, shift to PAO, a much safer synthetic oil that is now the absolute gold standard. Okay, so here's the part that blows most people's minds: how these things actually work. Most people picture a simple screen, like a strainer for spaghetti, but that's completely wrong. If it worked that way, tiny viruses would just sail right through. The reality is all about physics, and it is so much cooler. So first, you've got a principle called impaction. Let's just call these the big guys. These are larger particles, and they've got a lot of inertia. So as the air snakes its way through the filter fibers, these guys are too heavy to make the sharp turns. They just keep going straight and wham, slam right into a fiber. Next up is interception. These are our hitchhikers. They're the medium-sized particles, small enough to actually follow the airflow around the fibers. But as they cruise by, they get just a little too close to the edge and, thwip, they get snagged by the side of a fiber. Easy as that. And this brings us to the most mind-bending one of all: diffusion. These are the ninja particles. We're talking the absolute smallest particles. They are so incredibly tiny that individual air molecules are constantly smacking into them, knocking them around in this crazy, random zigzag dance. It's called Brownian motion. And because their path is so chaotic, it's pretty much inevitable that they're going to crash into a fiber and get stuck. So with all that cool science in mind, how do we actually go about hunting for that tiny, tiny fraction of a percent that might get through? How do we find the leak that could cost a company a fortune? Well, welcome to the modern cleanroom test. Right, so as we said, we've moved on. No more DOP, that liquid plastic mist with all the health questions. Today, it is all about PAO. It's a clean, stable, totally safe synthetic oil, and it gives us the most precise and repeatable results you could ask for. It is, without a doubt, the gold standard. So how's the scan actually done? It's a three-step dance. First, we create a challenge. We pump a really high, known concentration of that PAO aerosol. It looks like a thick, white smoke on the dirty side of the filter. Then we take a digital photometer, which is a super sensitive particle detector, and we scan every single inch of the clean side. And the rule is dead simple. If that detector finds a leak that is more than 0.01%, 1/100th of what we put on the other side, the filter fails. End of story. And, under the modern standards like ISO 146443, it's not enough to just know if it leaks. We have to know where. That means scanning the entire filter face, the frame, the seals, everything. Because a tiny little leak in the gasket is just as deadly as a hole punched right through the middle of the paper. So why are we so completely obsessed with this tiny number, this 0.01%? Why does this intense precision matter so much? Well, because our entire modern way of life is literally built on a foundation of 99.99% purity. Just think about it for a second. The super powerful chip in the smartphone you're holding, it needs an impossibly clean room to even exist. The life-saving vaccine that protects your family, it has to be made in a totally sterile environment. When these filters do their job, the global supply chain just works. When they fail, it all comes grinding to a halt. And hey, for all my fellow techs out there listening, here's a massive pro tip for you. Before you start any job, at the beginning of every single shift, you have to check the internal leak standards on your photometer. You need to verify that your machine is reading a true zero before you even think about introducing the challenge aerosol. It's a non-negotiable step for your data to mean anything. And that leads right into the final, most crucial piece of the puzzle. Your equipment absolutely must be calibrated to a traceable standard, like the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. Because without that calibration certificate, your numbers, your reports, they're all just expensive guesswork. You can't prove you're in compliance, and you sure can't guarantee safety. So this leaves us all with one big question to think about. Whether you're an engineer like me, a manager, or just someone who uses a smartphone. Is the clean environment you rely on actually clean? Or is everyone involved just kind of crossing their fingers and hoping for the best? The difference is in the details we just talked about, and it matters more than you can possibly see.